Hello again, everybody, and welcome. Today's topic is East Africa. We're going to take a little bit deeper look at the Horn of Africa that we had talked about yesterday. So, the countries that we're looking at are going to be these that are right here, including Rwanda and Burundi. South Sudan certainly could be included as a part of that, especially since it used to be part of Sudan, but we did mention South Sudan when we were talking about the Sahel. The area right through here is going to be real similar to what you would see in the Sahel, anyways. Um, but these are the countries that we're going to focus on today. All right. So, first thing I want to mention is a little bit of a current event. Right now, they are dealing with a locust outbreak in places like Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Djibouti, Eritrea, Uganda, Tanzania, and Congo. There's already been two swarms. There's likely to be another hitting in June and July. This is especially bad because you're talking about a place that already really struggles to feed itself. If it already struggles to feed itself, that's going to mean that locusts coming in and destroying the crops that they do have. That's going to make those issues with hunger and starvation even an even worse problem for them. Okay, so individual countries. Let's look at these a little more closely. All right. So the first country is Djibouti. I'm not going to go through everything here. You guys have the notes. You can go through them individually. Um, but I'll just give you a few highlights. Djibouti, located right here, okay, in between Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Um, they've been going through civil war periods in the 90s. They finally kind of get their independence in 2000. It's become a vital link between the capital of Ethiopia and the sea. At one point, all of this was coastline for Ethiopia. But because of civil wars, Eritrea is now an independent nation. Djibouti is now an independent nation, which means Ethiopia is now a landlocked country. They already don't have a lot. Taking away their coastline means their ability to trade as well. So, what little trade they are able to do, it's really going to primarily go through the country Djibouti. Let's see. Jumping over to Ethiopia. All right, so Ethiopia is an interesting case study because there's a lot of things where it doesn't really kind of add up. It doesn't really make sense, I guess you could say. You have what are considered to be evidence that shows that they may have some of the earliest civilizations. It's very possible that civilization itself could have started in Ethiopia. They have um, a physical landscape that sets them up for disaster. And here's what I mean by that: droughts and famine and starvation through the 1980s really has brought this country to near collapse. And if you look at the physical landscape, it should make perfect sense because here you have Ethiopia. Okay, so let's look. What is it that is coming towards them? We mentioned that you have the Sahara Desert here, and the winds from the Atlas Mountains are going to be hot and dry. They're going to get hotter and drier as they go across. Well, if we follow it, you're going to go across, you're going to get Sahara Desert, Sahara Desert, Sahara Desert, Sahara Desert, more Sahara Desert, more Sahara Desert, more Sahara Desert, and oh, by the way, now we get to Ethiopia. So the winds are going to be their hottest and their driest when they get to Ethiopia. And oh, by the way, there's also a mountain range here, which means what little moisture there even could be there, it's going to create a rain shadow area where Ethiopia, Somalia, places like that are going to be. So if you follow the physical geography, it should make perfect sense why things are the way they are. Let's see. We already talked about them having a civil war that has taken away their coastline. In '91, the government was overthrown. That granted their independence. Here's something really, really interesting. You would think a country that's had so much trouble with starvation and with hunger and with famine that they would be an easy country to overtake. But the reality is, of all the countries in Africa, Ethiopia is the one that has maintained their independence. They did not have a European colonizer, whether that's because, well, they didn't have whole lot of things that people wanted. Well, they do grow an awful lot of coffee. That is a major export that they do have. So that's not necessarily true. It was that they had advanced weapons before really everybody else around them. So they were able to kind of maintain their independence because of that. Now, here's another thing that I find terribly interesting about Ethiopia. There are some people who believe that if the Ark of the Covenant is real, that Ethiopia may be the place where it is located. This little town, this little village called Axum. Okay, Axum, middle of nowhere, Ethiopia. If we zoom out, you can see. All right, not a whole lot to speak of right there. But as we zoom in, we've got this small town, this place here, Ark of the Covenant, this little compound, and in this place, this Church of Saint Mary of Zion, you actually have people that have um, stories that have led to their queen had wound up having gone to Israel, wound up having a child with one of the kings that's escaping me here at the moment, but then entrusted that child to safeguard the ark and supposedly brought it back to Ethiopia, hid it here, and ever since then they have had monks that have been chosen. If you are chosen to be one of these monks that protect it, you are the only ones who have the divine providence that you to be allowed to see the actual Ark of the Covenant. And on top of that, because of this honor that they have to protect it, they are never allowed to leave that compound. So it might be something interesting to look into. Is it was supposedly in this small little building right here, and there's just a few people, like I say, that can see it, that are allowed in to see it, and they can never leave because of that honor. Okay, jumping over to Eritrea. We already showed you that one on the map. Originally part of Ethiopia, border war, they gained their independence. Because of them gaining independence the way they did, they now have the coastline. They are able to rebuild their economy because they're able to do a lot in the way of trading. Somalia. Let's show you Somalia. This country right here on kind of the tip of the horn. Um, Somalia has gone through a lot of issues, a lot of problems in their days. They're going to have the same kind of drought, famine, hunger, starvation that Ethiopia did. Severe drought through the 1990s. Ethiopia was more the 80s, Somalia is more the 90s. That's going to lead to a lot of anarchy, the lack of rule of law. Yeah, they had laws, but they had a government that couldn't enforce any of their laws. So it really kind of didn't matter. You saw a lot of groups trying to get power from Somalia because of this. Uh, and that's led to a lot of Islamic militia groups, what we would think of as terrorists, certainly Ethiopian troops trying to come in and maybe take some of that land for themselves. It's just been a major area of instability in the 1990s. You might remember the movie Black Hawk Down, if any of you have seen that. Somalia is where that took place. That was a real event. We were going in trying to find terrorists, trying to ultimately help the people there, and it all became a big trap. In the northwestern part of Somalia, there's actually a part that's trying to gain independence for themselves. They would call themselves Somaliland. There are some countries that have recognized it that say that yes, we believe Somaliland to be good enough to be their own independent nation. Lots of others do not. So it's very much disputed at this point. And we've mentioned before modern day pirates. This is where they're going to operate, and they operate out of Somalia. Why are they allowed to? Because of that lack of rule of law that we talked about. So, because of their coastline here, it gives them a lot of area to be able to work with. As oil tankers come around from the Persian Gulf, which is over here, this kind of becomes a prime spot for them to try and hijack an oil tanker, take it over, and ultimately hold it for ransom. Going back to the movies, there was a movie not long ago called Captain Phillips, which showed you a real life situation of this exact thing happening. They take an oil tanker hostage, or they take it over and they hold it for ransom. They make more money in that one getting that one ship than they probably would in years. That's what makes it kind of um, attractive to some of the people there. They typically use just small boats. It's not like the big ships you think in Pirates of the Caribbean or things like that. Small little boats that are able to go fast enough to catch up to these ships. All right, Sudan. One of the largest nations. Once they split with South Sudan, obviously that is going to take away a little bit of that land. Okay, so now we're just talking about this area up here. Primarily, the northern part, what we think of as Sudan today, was going to be Muslims. The Muslims that were there for a long, long time have oppressed the minority groups, the Christian groups living in the south and in the west, an area called Darfur. It's hard to say with any kind of certainty how many people have been killed as a part of this genocide, because you had mass killings, you had slavery, you've had individual executions, you've had a lot of different things that have surrounded Sudan. But ultimately, acts of genocide have taken place here, and that led to South Sudan trying to become an independent nation. Next country is Uganda. You're going to learn a lot more about this part here. The Yoweri Museveni taking power. He took power in the 1980s, I believe, and he used this rebel army that did use children soldiers, and that's what the video you're going to watch here in just a minute is going to cover. This is a place that does have some things going for it. Uganda, located right here. Okay. They do have some crops that will grow. They do have some things that they can make money on, but they have had major problems having to fight an AIDS epidemic. Rwanda, Burundi, both are what we call ethnocracies. Going to be places where one ethnic group is going to rule over everybody else. Rwanda primarily is what we call Hutu, and Burundi is more going to be controlled by the Tutsis. Okay? Rwanda is pretty well known for another act of genocide that took place in 1994. The Hutu majority killed about 800,000 Tutsis. Their president's plane was shot down. They blamed a Tutsi group called the Rwanda Patriotic Front, or Rwandese Patriotic Front. Blamed them for it, and in a moment's notice, you had Tutsis all over the country were being slaughtered. That's then going back into the movies. You want to learn more about that? Hotel Rwanda, a good one to watch to learn a little bit more about Rwanda. Burundi, you've seen Tutsis kind of be in charge, but they're in charge because they have the money and they have control of the army. In both places, you've seen the violence die down and more of a sharing of power. And our last country is going to be Tanzania. Okay, Tanzania is going to be this country here, furthest to the south. Rwanda, Burundi, by the way, were these two right here. The thing about Tanzania is they are the ultimate paradox. They have the potential for a lot of wealth. They have fertile soil. They have a variety of landscapes. They have mineral resources, things like iron ore, coal, and diamonds. But they're ultimately the second poorest country in the world because they have these things. You see a lot of people moving in to try and take advantage of them. So you've got too many people for them to take care of. On top of that, in order to make things like diamonds and iron ore and coal, make it so that you can use those things and make money off of those things, you have to have the money up front to be able to do that, and they just don't have that. So you've seen a lot of poverty issues in Tanzania. All right, so that gives you a little bit of insight into each one of these countries. Um, Go back to the module now, and you'll see that there's going to be a video once again that will show you a little bit more about Uganda.